Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever thought that maybe, just maybe, our oldest myths aren't just stories, that they could be urgent warnings coded and sent to us from the past? Well, today, that's exactly what we're going to explore.
So we're going to crack open this puzzle box of a legend from India. And trust me, once we start decoding it, we're going to uncover a hidden history, one with some pretty startling connections to our world right now.
Okay, so the main idea we're playing with here is something called the historification of myth. And really all it means is this: the belief that a story that seems packed with gods and curses and magic might actually be a kind of map, a map that points to real people, real places, and real events.
All right, let's set the scene. Our mystery starts in the Sundarbans, these huge, sprawling mangrove forests between India and Bangladesh. And it's here that an old legend has been told for centuries, a story about a man known only as the gun merchant.
So, on the surface, this story sounds pretty familiar, right? It's a classic. You've got this rich merchant, Banduki Saudagar, who makes a big mistake. He ticks off Manasa Devi, the super powerful goddess of snakes. She demands he worship her. He's like, nope, and boom, she unleashes her fury. He's forced to flee on this desperate journey, and the story is just filled with all the spooky, mystical stuff you'd expect from an old legend. But what if none of it was mystical? What if it was all real?
And this is where things get really interesting. See, in Amitav Ghosh's novel, Gun Island, the characters start looking at this legend and thinking, hang on a second. They begin to suspect that all the mythical bits aren't just fantasy. They're actually clues, almost like they're written in a secret, forgotten language.
So they asked this really radical question. What if all these fancy names and mystical symbols aren't magic at all? What if they're data, historical data, just waiting for someone to translate it? So, you ready? Let's see how they crack the code.
Okay. First piece of the puzzle, there's this key symbol at the merchant's shrine. For ages, everyone thought it was a hooded snake, representing the goddess. But it's not. It turns out to be a letter from the Hebrew alphabet, a huge, direct clue about who this merchant really was.
And the decoding doesn't stop there. The legend says the merchant fled to the Isle of Misery. Now that sounds totally made up, like something out of a fairy tale, right? But get this. Misri is just the Arabic word for Egypt. So this fantasy island was actually a real country all along.
Then there's another clue. This one about a really weird structure, an island within an island. Again, sounds mystical, kind of poetic, but nope. It turns out to be an incredibly precise description of the historic Jewish ghetto in Venice, which is literally a small, isolated island within the city. At this point, the code isn't just cracked, it's breaking wide open.
So once you have these keys, the whole myth just transforms. It's not a fairy tale anymore. It becomes a travel itinerary, a real-world map of a journey that actually happened centuries ago. It's amazing.
And they can even pin down when it happened by cross-referencing things mentioned in the story, like plagues and fires, with actual historical records. They can date the whole journey to a specific time, the 1630s. So think about that. This isn't some ancient, timeless myth from the dawn of humanity. It's a story from just a few hundred years ago. And what's really wild is that all the places it talks about, they still exist. You could go visit them.
All of a sudden, the merchant's journey doesn't look like a random, panicked escape anymore. It's a clear path. He starts at the shrine in the Sundarbans. The clues then point to Venice, and from there to Sicily, which the myth calls the Island of Chains. He wasn't just running blindly. He was following a very real trade and travel route from India all the way to Europe.
Okay, so this is a really cool historical puzzle, right? But so what? Why should we care about a 400-year-old story? I mean, what does a merchant's escape in the 1600s have to do with any of us right here, right now?
Well, here's the thing. The story argues that this history, it never really ended. The big themes, the central conflicts, they're repeating all around us, just in a modern form. You could almost say we're living in the sequel.
Take this, for example. At one point, the gun merchant is captured by pirates and sold into slavery. We tend to think of that as a terrible chapter of history that's long since closed. But the story draws this direct, chilling line to modern human trafficking, where millions of people are still being bought and sold today. The name might have changed, but the horror, that's still here.
And what about all that supernatural stuff? The goddess's anger, showing up as snakes, crazy storms, fires, plagues. Back in the 17th century, that was seen as divine punishment. But today, we have a different name for it. Today, we recognize those things as the very real consequences of climate change.
The myth becomes this incredibly powerful metaphor for the massive ecological forces we've unleashed, forces we often try really hard to ignore.
So looking at the myth this way isn't just some clever literary game. It forces us to ask a really tough question, not just about the past, but about ourselves. What big truths are we, as a society, choosing to look away from right now?
I mean, think about it. Just 300 years ago, it was considered an absolute, unquestionable fact that the Earth was static and the universe revolved around it. Today, we know that's completely wrong, a total delusion. It's a pretty powerful reminder that what one generation sees as undeniable truth, the next might see as a dangerous fantasy.
And that, right there, is the final, urgent message of the gun merchant story. It's a warning against our own great derangement, our modern cultural denial of a crisis that is happening right in front of us. The myth is basically suggesting that maybe we're the ones living inside a fantasy, ignoring a reality that's becoming more and more dangerous.
So this leaves us with one last, pretty provocative thought. If a 400-year-old legend can hold a warning that's so relevant today, then what warnings are hidden inside the stories we tell ourselves right now? In our movies, our books, even our news headlines. Are they trying to tell us something important about the history we're creating? And maybe more importantly, are any of us actually listening?